Hey guys, it's Olivia and I'm back with another video. So you've already read the title, you know what this video is about. It is about Spider-Man No Way Home. So if you haven't watched the movie yet, stop watching this video right now because there are going to be a lot of spoilers, because how am I supposed to give my commentary on a movie without talking about what happens in the movie? And the second disclaimer I want to make is, if you haven't watched all three Spider-Man franchises, the Tobey Maguire version, the Andrew Garfield version, and the Tom Holland version, then you might be a little bit confused because I'm going to be referencing all three franchises. Because if you've seen the trailer, you know that the villains from the two previous Spider-Man franchises are now in this third Spider-Man franchise. So I'm going to be referencing the old movies because I'm going to be referencing the old villains. So those are just two things I want to say, and now let's get into the video. So this video is going to be broken into two parts. The first part is going to be things I predicted were going to happen in the movie that actually happened, and then the second part is going to be some plot holes that I found in the movie, and maybe it's just some stuff I missed, and maybe you guys have the answers, and if you do, you can answer them down below. But the movie left me with a little bit of questions after I finished watching it. So, part one. Things I predicted that were going to happen that actually happened. So this is something that everybody and their mama predicted, that because the Tobey and Andrew universe villains were going to be in it, then maybe Tobey and Andrew themselves were going to be in the movie. Well, of course they were. And like in the theater that I was in, when like they first appeared, like when they took off their mask and it was that version of Spider-Man and then the other version of Spider-Man, everyone was cheering, myself included. I was so happy. Like, I knew it was gonna be in it because it just had to be. But like when it actually happened in front of my eyes, I was so happy. So there were a couple of clues leading up to the movie's release that made me know for sure that Tobey and Andrew were going to be in this movie. So the first clue for me was Netflix. So a couple of months ago, the full Spider-Man franchises were not on Netflix. There was the first Tobey Maguire movie, the first Andrew Garfield movie, and the first Tom Holland movie. But the rest of the Spider-Man movies weren't on Netflix. And then probably 2 weeks before the release of No Way Home, now all of a sudden all the movies are available. All three Tobey Maguire movies, the two Andrew Garfield movies, and then the first two Tom Holland movies, the third one being No Way Home, which just came out. So that got me thinking, the only reason they would be giving you access to all of the Spider-Man movies is because they're gonna be in the newest movie. Like, you don't have to have watched all of the MCU movies in order to understand No Way Home, because I haven't watched all of the MCU movies. Maybe there's some like inside jokes or little references to other Avengers movies that I didn't get, but for the most part, for the big picture, for the main story, all you had to do was watch the previous Spider-Man movies. You didn't have to watch the whole MCU universe and all the shows in between. You didn't have to do all that. So in my opinion, in order to get the full effect of No Way Home, you needed to watch the three Tobey Maguire movies, the two Andrew Garfield movies, and the first two Tom Holland movies. And then all three of those universes come together in No Way Home. So if you hadn't watched those first 7 Spider-Man movies, then the 8th one wouldn't have had as much of an effect. So I'm like, they're putting out these movies so that for people who haven't watched it, they can get caught up so that they can enjoy No Way Home, or for people who have already watched it, for them to just refresh their memory before watching No Way Home. So the fact that they made all the Spider-Man movies available right before No Way Home came out, I'm like, okay, they're gonna be in it. Like, they're gonna be in it. The second giveaway for me as to why Tobey and Andrew were gonna be in it is because since I've watched previous Spider-Man movies, I've always seen this pattern. So starting with the first Tobey Maguire movie, it was Spider-Man versus the Green Goblin. 1 against 1, Spider-Man wins. In the second Tobey Maguire movie, it is Spider-Man versus Doc Ock. 1-on-1, Spider-Man wins. In the third Tobey Maguire movie, I'm going to call him Green Goblin 2 because it's Green Goblin's son who then takes on his role to avenge his father. If you've seen the movie, then you know what I'm talking about. So at the very beginning of the movie, it's Spider-Man versus Green Goblin 2, and Spider-Man wins because Green Goblin 2 gets amnesia. If you've watched the movie, you know what I'm talking about, right? But then at the end of the movie, it's Spider-Man versus Sandman and Venom. It's 1 against 2, and Spider-Man is getting his butt kicked. Then Green Goblin 2 decides to forgive Spider-Man and joins his side. So now it's Spider-Man and Green Goblin 2 versus Sandman and Venom. 2 against 2, and Spider-Man wins. Green Goblin 2 ends up dying, but that's not the point. Spider-Man won. He stayed alive, okay? He won the battle, okay? Then moving on to Andrew Garfield's version. In the first movie, it's Spider-Man versus the Lizard. Spider-Man wins. Second movie, it's Spider-Man versus Electro. Spider-Man wins. And then at the very, very end of the second Andrew Garfield movie, there's a different Green Goblin, not William Dafoe's version or James Franco's version. It's Harry, but a different Harry. Whatever. You know what I'm talking about, because as I said, if you haven't watched all these movies, you shouldn't be watching this video because it's not going to make sense, right? So you know what I'm talking about because you've watched the whole Spider-Man franchise, right? So a different Green Goblin, it's Spider-Man versus this other Green Goblin. We're going to call him Green Goblin 3. And Spider-Man wins. Gwen ends up dying in the process, but the point is Spider-Man stayed alive. When I say he won, I just mean he didn't die. That's what I'm saying, right? So then we've established from these first 5 Spider-Man movies, 3 from Tobey Maguire, 3 from Andrew Garfield, whenever it's 1-on-1 or 2-on-2, whenever it's an even match, 2 on the good side, 2 on the bad side, 1 on the good side, 1 on the bad side, Spider-Man's side always ends up winning, right? So then from the trailer, we don't see Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, but we do see all the villains. We see Doc Ock, we see Green Goblin 1, we see the Lizard, I think he's in the second trailer, and we see Electro, and then we see Sandman. I think we get shown all 5 of the villains that are going to show up. So you really think it's going to be all 5 of them against Tom Holland? How on earth is he going to win? How is he going to win? It's 5-1. Literally impossible. Like he would die. He would die. It can't be 5-1. So they had to even the playing field. I'm like, there have to be other good guys on his side. It has to be the other Spider-Man. So if you've watched No Way Home, which we've established you have because you got this far into the video, Doc Ock ends up being turned into a good guy about halfway through the movie. The chip in his neck gets fixed, so now he is in control of his arms instead of the arms being in control of him. So we had 5 villains and Tom Holland. Then we get Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, and then Doc Ock leaves the bad side and joins the Spider-Men. So now it's 4 against 4, so now the good guys are gonna win. Like, there had to be something to even it out. We've established whenever there's more villains than good guys, Spider-Man loses. We've already, through the whole franchise, we have established this. So I'm like, there has to be a way to even the playing field. I did not predict that Doc Ock was going to get turned good. I didn't predict that the main premise of the movie was going to be curing the previous villains. I did not see that one coming, right? So I didn't know that Doc Ock was going to turn good, but I did know that they were going to have to even the playing field in some way. Based on previous Spider-Man movies, you have to have an even number or Spider-Man loses. It needs to be equal or Spider-Man loses. We've established this. So that was my other dead giveaway. I'm like, there can't be 5 villains and 1 Spider-Man. Like, it's not gonna work. So then, the second thing, this isn't something that I necessarily predicted. I saw it on Twitter, but it was like I saw so many predictions on Twitter and I was like, okay, that's not happening, that's not happening, that's not happening. But then I came across this one and I'm like, oh my gosh, that one's totally gonna happen. And it did, and I'm so happy that it did. Oh my gosh, okay. So my second prediction, which wasn't really mine, but something I knew was gonna happen before even going to watch it, was that okay, so in the second Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, he doesn't save Gwen. Like, she's falling and he doesn't quite save her in time, right? So then in the trailer, we see that MJ, Tom Holland's MJ, is falling and we see someone reaching out to her. And I'm like, it's Andrew Garfield. Like, he's gonna save her. Like, he didn't get a chance to save his love interest, but he's gonna save Tom Holland's love interest. I'm like, oh my gosh, it's gonna happen. Like, they're gonna give him that. Like, he didn't get to save Gwen, but he's gonna get to save Michelle. I was like, oh my gosh. I'm like, that's gonna happen. And then it did. And when it did, it was so much better than I thought it was gonna be. Like, firstly, we all know this. Andrew Garfield is a great actor. But, like, in that moment, I was just like, I was all up in my feelings, like, just, like, his facial expression and, like, the tone of his voice, like, when he asked her, like, if she's okay, and he was, like, tearing up, and I was like, oh my gosh, he got to save her. Like, he didn't get to save his MJ, but he got to save this MJ, and I was like, oh my god, like, I was in my feelings, like, oh my gosh, I was so happy. Like, I knew it was gonna happen, but seeing it play out on the screen, like, oh my gosh, that is my favorite moment in the entire movie. Like, oh my gosh, I'm so happy that that happened. I feel like the other Spider-Man, they got their happy ending. Like, in No Way Home, we find out that Tobey Maguire and Mary Jane, so his MJ, ended up working things out, so they're still together. And I know that at the end of No Way Home, Michelle ends up, like, forgetting Peter, as well as the rest of the world forgets Peter, but because of something we're going to talk about later, I figure this isn't the final Spider-Man movie, so this isn't the end of their story as far as I'm concerned. But then the end of Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man was his girlfriend died. And I'm like, no, he needs to be happy too. And now, like, that obviously doesn't replace Gwen for him, but, like, at least I got to see him, like, have his moment, and I'm just so happy. I don't know if you can tell, but Andrew Garfield's version of Spider-Man is my favorite. This isn't me, like, bashing any other versions. This is just my personal preference. Andrew Garfield is my favorite Spider-Man, and I'm happy that he got to be happy, and that's all I want to say. So anyways, those are the two things I predicted and the clues that made me figure it out before the movie came out. Now, here are some plot holes. And as I said, maybe they're not plot holes. Maybe these are explained in other Marvel movies, but I haven't seen them. Like, the only MCU movies I've seen are the first two Iron Mans, the first Ant-Man, and then the Tom Holland Spider-Mans. Like, from the current Marvel franchise, those are the only ones I've seen. So I haven't seen the Thor movies. I haven't seen, like, the movies with all the Avengers, like Civil War and Endgame, and I haven't seen WandaVision. I haven't seen Black Widow. Like, I haven't seen most of the movies and, like, the shows that came out in between. Like, I'm not really into the Marvel stuff like that. Like, I'm just telling you. So maybe some of this stuff is answered in those movies. So if you have the answer, comment down below and tell me. But here are just some questions I have after watching No Way Home. So the first thing that got me thinking was J. Jonah Jameson. So he is the publisher for the Daily Bugle. But you see, he exists in both Tobey's version and Tom Holland's version. And it's not like, oh, in the multiverse, each universe has a Peter Parker, but they're all, like, different in their own way. Like, all of the universes have an MJ. All of the universes have a Peter Parker, but, like, they're unique in their own way. Like, no, it's the same guy that plays him in both universes. And it's not like J. Jonah Jameson got brought over from Tobey's universe into Tom's. Like, no, he was already there because he's the one who reveals that Tom's version of Peter Parker is Spider-Man in that universe. So he is himself before the multiverse is even open. So how does this one guy exist in both universes? It's not a different version of the same character. No, it's the same guy. How does he exist in both universes? Huh? Explain that. Explain that to me, because that doesn't make any sense. Then, the second question I have breaks up into multiple parts. Because if you change one thing from the past, it creates a whole domino effect. So let me start here. When we're watching Nowhere Home, we find out that 3 of the villains get brought to Tom's universe right before they were supposed to die in their original universe. So those 3 villains are Doc Ock, the Green Goblin, and Electro. But the 2 other villains in this movie are the Lizard and Sandman. Those 2 characters in their original universes don't die. This is relevant to my question. So let's focus on the Lizard for a second. The Lizard is the main villain in The Amazing Spider-Man 1, so the first Andrew Garfield movie. In that movie, Andrew cures the Lizard. Okay? So let's just focus on that point for a second. The whole premise of Nowhere Home is curing the villains before we send them back to their universes. But in the original universe of the first Amazing Spider-Man, the first Andrew Garfield movie, the Lizard already gets cured. But when he gets brought to Tom Holland's universe, he is still in his reptilian form. So we're not clear on exactly when he gets transported from Andrew's universe to Tom's. Because it's not right before he dies, because he doesn't die. So for the Green Goblin, we know he gets transported right before the glider kills him. Doc Ock, we know he gets transported right before he falls into the lake. Electro, we know he gets transported right before he overloads with electricity. But we don't know the exact point in which the Lizard gets brought to Tom Holland's universe. It doesn't specify. This is where the domino effect comes into play. So in the ending of the first Andrew Garfield Spider-Man, the Lizard fatally wounds Captain Stacy, who is Gwen's father, and Gwen is Andrew Garfield's girlfriend in the movie. So he wounds the captain and then tries to stop Andrew from releasing the antidote into the air. So this begs the question, does the Lizard get transported to Tom Holland's universe before or after he hurts Gwen's dad? Because if he gets transported to Tom's universe before he hurts Gwen's dad, that means after Tom Holland cures him and he gets sent back to his universe, then he won't have the capability to kill Gwen's dad, which means Gwen's dad is alive now. That means he doesn't die. So that's the first domino. Gwen's dad might not end up dying. Okay? So then that domino effect goes over into the second movie, because we've already established that Gwen dies at the end of the second movie. But at the end of the first movie, while Gwen's dad is dying, he makes Andrew's version of Spider-Man promise to stay away from Gwen.
Promise me.
Which obviously he ends up breaking that promise because they spend the whole second movie together, right? But if Gwen's dad doesn't die, then he doesn't have to make Andrew promise to stay away from Gwen, because he himself, his alive self, will keep Gwen away from Andrew. Which would mean that in the second movie, when the Green Goblin goes to take Gwen and kill her in the clock tower, Gwen wouldn't have even been there because her dad wouldn't have let her be Andrew's girlfriend anymore. So then Gwen wouldn't have died either. So if the Lizard gets cured and Gwen's dad doesn't die, that also means Gwen wouldn't die. So then when Andrew goes back to his universe, Gwen might be alive, and then now he has a girlfriend again. Like, I don't know. Like, that's like, huh? Since we don't know when the lizard got transported to Tom Holland's universe, that could change who died back in Andrew Garfield's universe. So then he might show up back in his universe and Gwen is just there. I'm just saying. Okay, now, another question I have. So once again, we need context. So the premise of No Way Home, the reason why everything ends up getting chaotic is because Spider-Man's identity gets revealed. Oh, Peter Parker, Spider-Man, right? And because Ned and Michelle are friends with Peter, their lives also become a forefront for like the paparazzi and stuff like that. Like, they get a bad rap for being friends with Spider-Man because Mysterio framed him for all the casualties that happened in Europe. So the public is split. Some people think that Spider-Man is a hero and other people think that he's a murderer because they believe Mysterio's story, right? So this is all to say that because Ned and Michelle are friends with him, none of them end up getting into MIT, which is this university that they all wanted to get into. So then Peter's like, oh, because my identity got revealed, my friends' lives are getting ruined, blah, blah, blah. Which is why he goes to Doctor Strange to cast the spell, but then the spell goes awry because Peter keeps trying to change the spell while it's being cast, right? Right. This context is necessary. So let's create a timeline to make this a little bit easier. Let's say that Peter and his friends get rejected from MIT on December 1st. On December 2nd, the spell is cast. All the villains show up. December 4th is when they discover the other two Spider-Men were there the whole time. And then on that same night, on the 4th, is when the big battle ensues and they send everyone back to their respective universe. So then on December 5th, now that the whole world doesn't know that Peter Parker exists, including Michelle and Ned, on the 5th, he walks into the coffee shop where Michelle works, and Michelle and Ned have already been accepted to MIT, which means that the past has been changed. Because on December 1st, they had all received their rejection letters. But now that Peter doesn't exist, or that no one remembers that he exists, those rejection letters already became acceptance letters, which means the past has been changed. Since no one knows who Peter Parker is, then the admissions office had no reason to decline Michelle and Ned, right? Which means they got in. But then, this is just me trying to bring people back to life at this point. Wouldn't that mean that Aunt May wouldn't have died either? Like, okay, the only reason why Aunt May was at the fight is because she knew that Peter was Spider-Man. So she was there to help Peter. But then the Green Goblin ends up stabbing her with his glider or whatever, right? So if she didn't know that Peter existed, because he made everyone forget, then she wouldn't have been at Happy's place, which means she wouldn't have been stabbed by the Green Goblin, which means she'd still be alive. So if Michelle and Ned's rejection letters can automatically become acceptance letters, like their past letters don't exist anymore, then wouldn't that mean that on the day of the fight, Aunt May would have been somewhere else because she wouldn't have been helping Peter because she didn't know that Peter existed? Do you know what I'm saying? Like, if Michelle and Ned's past can be changed, then couldn't May's past of being killed because of Peter be changed? Because if she didn't know Peter existed, she wouldn't have been there. Because, like, at the end, when Tom Holland is at her grave and then Happy shows up and is like, oh, how did you know her, blah, 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 wouldn't that have changed how she died? Because she wouldn't have died in a fight with Spider-Man, because she wouldn't have been helping Spider-Man if she didn't know Peter Parker? So how could she be dead? Like, oh my gosh, my brain hurts. Oh my goodness gracious. And the last thing that I have a question about is relating to the first mid-credit scene when they give teasers about what's going to happen next in the MCU. So in the first mid-credit scene, we have Eddie Brock, who is Venom, and he is at a bar talking to the bartender. So as I said, I haven't watched most of the movies in the MCU. So I haven't watched either of the Venom movies. But Venom is one of the villains from the third Tobey Maguire movie. So from what I know based on that version of Venom, Venom is like this alien black goop symbiote thing that attaches to a host and then basically turns that person into Venom. And from what I know from that movie, once the symbiote chooses a host, it's very hard to separate the host from the alien goop, right? The way Tobey Maguire was able to do it was he realized that the symbiote didn't like the sound from the bell tower. So he just like clanked and made a bunch of chime sounds in order to get rid of it, essentially. But basically what my thought process is, you know how with the Green Goblin, how Norman can't choose when the Green Goblin takes over? The way I see Venom, I don't know what the current Venom is like, but back in the day, Venom was like that. Like once it was attached to you, it started to change your personality. It started to change your thoughts. When Tobey was wearing the black Spider-Man suit, he started to become more arrogant, more brash, more raw, if that makes sense. He wasn't his like kind, sweet Peter Parker self. He got these negative characteristics because he was wearing the suit that had been infused with the symbiote. And so Eddie Brock, who is now the host of Venom, wouldn't he also have that urge to like do bad things? Like when Norman is himself, he's just a regular schmegular dude. But then when he becomes the Green Goblin, he just has the urge to kill everybody, right? So once Venom takes over Brock, doesn't he have the urge to just kill everybody? So then this gets me thinking, if we go back to my timeline, the villains come into Tom Holland's universe on December 2nd, and they don't get defeated till a couple of days later, right? So all the other villains had the urge to find their respective Spider-Man. Doc Ock, the Green Goblin, and Sandman were all looking for Tobey. Electro and the Lizard were looking for Andrew, but then they all kept finding Tom, right? But the point is they were all looking for their respective Spider-Man. So wouldn't Venom also be looking for his respective Spider-Man? Like you're telling me that he was in Tom Holland's universe for like 3 days and the whole time he just spent it sitting in a bar? Or like he didn't spend the time looking for Spider-Man. So this just has me thinking, wouldn't Venom have corrupted Eddie Brock's brain and make him evil and make him want to destroy Spider-Man? For the days when Tom Holland was trying to cure the other villains, when they had that big fight at the end with the 3 Spider-Men and Doc Ock fighting the other 4 villains, like the whole time that whole plot was going on, Venom was there the whole time. He was in Tom Holland's universe the entire time, but he never had the urge to go out and find Spider-Man, which doesn't make any sense to me. If you're a supervillain, why aren't you with the other 5 villains fighting the Spider-Man? Like, why? Like, that doesn't make any sense. Like, you were chilling in Tom Holland's universe for 3 days, and you didn't once seek out Spider-Man. You just thought, I'm just gonna sit here, and the moment I decide, hey, maybe I should be a proactive villain and go after the superheroes, the minute you realize that you're not villaining properly, you get transported back to your universe? Like, that doesn't make any sense to me. While every other villain is going out and being villains, you were just chilling. What? That doesn't make any sense. But then that also creates a whole other problem, because Tom Holland and Andrew Garfield and Tobey Maguire, they cured all the villains. So now they have all been sent back to their universe as good guys, or as their former selves, right? But Venom never got cured because he wasn't a part of any of the battles. Like, none of the Spider-Men knew that Venom was one of the villains that made it through. So they didn't even think to cure Venom because they didn't even know he was there, because he didn't approach them. He just was minding his business. So now he gets to go back to his universe and continue to be evil because no one thought to cure him because they didn't know he was there. What? I'm so confused. Like, you were just a villain and you just weren't being evil for 3 days? Like, you have an alien, like, controlling your thoughts and actions, and you just didn't be evil? Like, if villains were capable of going 1 day, let alone 3 days, without being evil, then we wouldn't have had a movie in the first place. All of the other villains were evil from the jump. The moment they got to Tom Holland's universe, they're like, we gonna be evil. We gonna find all the Spider-Man and we gonna kill him, right? But Venom was just chilling. No one knew he was there. What? Anyways, so that's it. Those are my thoughts on Spider-Man No Way Home. It was a really good movie. Like, I genuinely enjoyed it. I went and I watched it with 5 of my friends, and it was just a very good time. I'm so glad that we got to watch it. But yeah, so if you haven't watched the movie, I told you to leave at the beginning of the video, but if you haven't watched the movie, I highly recommend. It's very, very good. It's basically nostalgia. Like, it's like old age and new age together. Like, it's the new Spider-Man from now, like, that you're experiencing in, like, your young adulthood, but then you also have the same Spider-Man from your childhood. So, like, it's just so good. It's so good. But most of you probably already know that, because why would you be watching a commentary video about a movie that you haven't watched yet? But yeah, like, it's a movie I would definitely want to watch again. It was just a very good movie. It was a very good experience. It was a very good night out with my friends. It just hit me in the feels. Like, mainly the Andrew Garfield moments. They hit me in the feels. And yeah, I really enjoyed the movie. It's a very good movie. Go watch it if you haven't. And if you have, go watch it again, because it's very good. So that's all for this week's video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give it a thumbs up. If you think your friends will enjoy it, be sure to share it with them. All my social media links will be down below in case you want to follow me on there. Be sure to subscribe to my channel because I'm making videos every Monday. And be sure to check out one of these suggested videos. And I'll see you next Monday with a new video.